We all get a bit excited when new weapons, vehicles and maps drop for BF5, but with Tides of War we often only know what's coming for the next few weeks. For example, this week is the Archer tank and the week after that is the Ross Mark III rifle. We know they're coming, and thanks to the Tides of War screen we actually already know exactly what we're going to need to do to obtain them. I would love to see some new maps as soon as possible though. With that being said, because of some new in-game dog tags, we know of 5 new guns coming to the game. The Patchett, the Lanchester, the Madsen MG, the Wellgun and the M1917 Enfield. Some interesting guns on the way that we'll take a look at in a second. Before we get stuck in, today's video is sponsored by Nvidia. All of the gameplay here is recorded at 4K ultra settings with RTX ray tracing and DLSS turned on with an RTX 2080 Ti card. RTX I've already covered in a BF5 video before, and that will give you real-time ray traced reflections in this game, and it just gives certain levels a whole new ambience to them. They pop a bit more, they look a bit more realistic. The reflections in the windows and the puddles and the water, everything is taking in the light around it. RTX just looks incredible in Metro Exodus 2 with the global illumination effects that has, and I did a video on that a couple of days ago. DLSS, however, that's only just been implemented in the last few days, and in layman's terms it's kind of an interesting new form of anti-aliasing or upscaling, I suppose, that's trained using deep learning AI. Now I've tried it on BF5 here, and while it definitely gives you a performance boost at 4K, the image quality is slightly degraded in my opinion, and it's got this weird soapy blurriness to it. Nvidia say that will improve over time though, as their algorithm is fed more samples. We'll see. Either way, be sure to watch this video using the 4K option below if your internet can handle it. Even if you don't have a 4K display, the quality will still be better as YouTube assigns that option with a higher bitrate. Back to BF5 stuff now. So this week's assignment will be for the Valentine Archer tank. This was a British self-propelled anti-tank machine based on the Valentine infantry tank. It was fitted with a QF 17 pounder gun, and this makes a lot of sense really, considering in last week's assignment we were given the Stug 4, which is a very similar type of tank but for the German forces. The Archer tank was manufactured by Vickers Armstrongs, and only 655 were produced between March 1943 and May 1945. The unique thing about this one is that the gun actually faced the rear of the chassis instead of the front, so I'm interested to see this in game and get a feel for how it operates. The week after that we're going to be able to unlock the Ross Mark III bolt action rifle, which some players will be very familiar with from BF1. It was added with the Apocalypse expansion and of course was for the scout class. I think it's safe to say that this gun will also be a new recon weapon in BF5. I can't imagine it straying too far away from the BF1 version, so I guess that we'd be looking at something reasonably similar to the Lee Enfield or the Gewehr M95. And this was a straight pull bolt action rifle that was produced in Canada from 1903 to 1918. What's more interesting to me though is all of the other new guns that we're going to get here that haven't been announced yet, and more specifically the ones that we didn't get to play with in previous games. The Madsen MG is one of the yet unannounced BF5 guns, but it did feature for the support class in BF1, and it was a light machine gun designed in Denmark, and it was the world's first machine gun that was produced in significant quantity, first being issued in 1902. It's pretty distinctive though because of the box magazine at the top of the gun, which can be a pretty big distraction. Of course we already have the Bren in the game, which also has a vertical magazine that can be quite annoying. In BF1 though, the Madsen was a bit of a hidden gem. It was a really strong support weapon, having a modest rate of fire of 540 RPM, but it packed a real punch. It had a default mag of only 30 bullets, so this would definitely be a light machine gun in BF5 rather than a medium machine gun. The next gun we're getting is called the Lanchester, and it's an SMG. Now I'm pretty confident we can say that this is going to be a medic gun unless the weapon balance of the game changes dramatically. It was made between 1941 and 1945, and you may think it looks a lot like the German MP28, and you'd be right because it's pretty much a copy. It was used by the British forces during the Second World War. After the Dunkirk evacuation in 1940, the British made the decision that they needed a submachine gun for airfield defence, so there really wasn't very much time to put into research and development, so what did they do? Well, they just copied the MP28. I expect this gun may feel very familiar, and so even though it's a new weapon, it might still come across as the same as the MP28. There was a few different variants of it made though, so maybe we'll get a slightly different direction to set it apart. Fingers crossed. Speaking of submachine guns, there are more. Is the medic class about to get some love? It certainly seems so. The Patchet is the next gun we're taking a look at. This was developed by Sterling Engineering in 1944 as an experimental weapon, but it wasn't accepted into the British Army until after World War II. It was meant as a replacement for the Sten submachine gun, which we can already play with in the game. It was certainly tested a lot before its eventual acceptance by the British Army, undergoing extensive trials against other submachine guns and being trialled in Malaya, Kenya, Libya and Korea to cover a range of climatic conditions. It wasn't actually fully accepted until 1953, which was of course some time after the Second World War. But DICE do take a few liberties with experimental weapons, and providing that they're fun to use, I'm fine with that. It does look quite similar to the Sten too. And speaking of experimental weapons, one of the next weapons listed in the dog tags is the well gun. Looks really cool, this one. It was a prototype submachine gun developed by the British Special Forces Executive, but despite performing well in tests, it was only ever produced in small numbers. The gun used the same 9mm cartridge as the Sten, mainly because this round was also used by the Axis forces, so restocking ammo was a lot easier as you could utilise any enemy ammunition that you came across. It used the same 32 round single feed magazine as the Sten, but it actually fed vertically rather than sideways. It also had a folding stock, and with this gun only being a little over 16 inches when folded, it could easily be concealed. It looks more like a smaller PDW more than anything. It was known to be very accurate as a submachine gun, and it had quite long range too. Be interesting to see how this fits into the game. Now, the last new gun that we know about from these dog tags is the M1917 Enfield, also known as the American Enfield. It was an American modification of the 1914 Enfield, and it was the main weapon used by the American Expeditionary Forces during World War I. At the time of the American forces' entry into the Second World War, the US Army was still issuing the M1917 to chemical mortarmen because there was M1 Garand shortages. What's interesting about this though is that at the moment there aren't any American forces in the game, although we know that they will be added in at some point. It seems as though British forces did use the gun too though, but they did equip it with a red stripe to differentiate it from their own P14 rifles. There was also another weapon that was found kind of accidentally, and it happened in an online game on console. I don't know how this occurred, but someone managed to spawn in with the Shosho. Of course this must have been a bug or an oversight, but the gun is in the game files and it's also in the single player, but it's just not released yet in multiplayer. The Shosho was another BF1 weapon for the support class. It was added in with the They Shall Not Pass DLC, and while it fired really slow, it did do big damage, and so it was a really nice weapon to use. When will we see it in BF5? Well, that's unclear. Now, one thing to remember is that while these guns have been found inside the game, there's no word on when they will actually become available. Some of them could be bonus weapons that get added into the game across the next few months, and others could be guns tied to specific Tides of War assignments. Often weapons are added into patches before they're available, or there are certain updates which contain references to weapons that haven't quite been hidden as well as they could have been. Some of these guns may not even be finished yet, and they might just be references to weapons that DICE plan to add. But the weapons themselves are not finished or ready for the game. I know that when players see references to all of these guns, they inevitably think, well, why don't DICE just let us play with them now? It's sadly not always that simple. Also, it's possible that some of these weapons we've talked about may never even see the light of day. Now, moving on, I saw some interesting things on Twitter from Drunksy, and he's a core gameplay designer on BF5. He was asked by someone if the medic class would ever get a secondary main weapon, a bit like the assault class. They've got the assault rifles and semi-autos. He responded by saying, yes, they will be getting something else. What does that mean exactly? Well, it sounds like at some point the medic class will be getting another weapon type. Could they get access to certain semi-autos? Maybe they'll get shotguns or something else. It's not really clear what DICE have got planned here, but if you remember the early tests of the game, the Gewehr 43 was originally on the medic class before being removed and given to the assault. Perhaps bolt-action rifles could be a good choice. So there we go guys, that's 5 yet unannounced weapons, as well as the Shosho that's also been referenced, and the Ross rifle we know is coming via Tides of War in the next few weeks. As well as that, another tank next week in the form of the Archer. While I want the SMG class to have some interesting weapons, it has to be said that quite a few of these guns are very similar, including some that are direct improvements to the Sten or even an MP28 replica. And of course, a couple of them we got in BF1. I just really hope that DICE start introducing new weapons that we haven't played in BF1 as soon as possible. However, I do really want to see what DICE do with the medic class and what possible other weapon types they're going to add to it. So that's all for today, guys. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What weapons would you love to see come to the game? A big thanks to Nvidia for sponsoring this one. Once again, we were playing at 4K using the RTX and DLSS technologies. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.